We spoke of our love for the first adaptation of The Crow way back in episode 123 of the FilmFile podcast. It's a beloved cult classic that oozed style and was swiftly followed by a rapidly plummeting quality of sequels and a TV series. Decades on from that original film, a new take on the character has finally arrived, after an arduous production fraught with delays. Suffice to say that on the run-up to this film, the internet chatter has been rather negative, commenting on every aspect of the glimpses that we saw through set pics and trailers on why this film will be an abomination. But still, I always like to approach a new take on a property that I love with an open mind, and I believe that there's no harm in attempting a new adaptation of something for a new audience. Settling in for the screening, I decided to take this film at face value, on its own merits, and avoid comparing it to the Brandon Lee starring film. The film opens with a segment that is lifted straight out the pages of the original comic book, seeing Eric Draven as a child struggling to free his horse from barbed wire cutting into its skin, and showing us the strained family environments that he was raised into. Cut to present day, and the years of childhood trauma have resulted in him residing in an institute for troubled youth. There he keeps himself isolated from the others, until a young woman with troubles of her own, Shelley, enters his world. The pair are immediately drawn together, finding connection through their traumas and sparking a pure love between them. However, Shelley's troubles have a direct threat as she's hiding from a crime lord named Vincent Rogue, who is after her as she holds a video implicating him in crimes. And when Rogue's right-hand operative Marion comes seeking Shelley, she and Eric flee the institute and go into hiding. But they don't stay hidden long, and they are attacked and killed by Rogue's men. But Eric finds himself drawn into an afterlife full of crows, where he finds a guide who tells him that he can return to exact revenge and free Shelley's soul from eternal damnation. Entering the real world again, with undying abilities, Eric begins tracking down those who damned Shelley. Rupert Sanders gave us Snow White and the Huntsman, and the unfairly maligned Ghost in the Shell adaptation. And with this film, he infuses the look with a dirty yet beautiful aesthetic. The constantly rain-washed streets of the real world, contrasted by the surreal railroad warehouse of the afterlife, lend the film its own tone and a very sombre presence throughout. Into this arena, Bill Skarsgård and FKA Twigs bring some joy and beauty and make for a captivating partnering over the first act. Danny Huston, as the crime lord Vincent Rogue, brings his usual menacing game that always makes him perfect in these kind of roles. The action is brutal and bloody, with some stylistic touches that will remind audiences of the John Wick films, but the film isn't just action. Indeed, for the majority of the first half, we get a much slower paced affair, with even Eric's first return to our plane of existence not going the way that you would expect. But the last half of the film starts to ramp up to a frenetic fury of ultra-violence, which will please many crowds, even if it does seem tonally imbalanced to the previous acts. And therein lies the issues here. There's nothing inherently wrong about the individual aspects of The Crow, and indeed fans of the graphic novel Origins will love some of the creative and story choices taken throughout. But it does feel a little uneven in tone, to such a degree that it makes it hard to try to work out whether this is a sombre musing on lost love or a gung-ho action flick with a bit of style. It leaves the film with a resonance of studio interference, and the delays in production and release suggested this much. Whilst the aforementioned central cast are all perfectly placed, the support around them are immediately unmemorable. A few characters that could have been a bit more interesting are seriously underdeveloped. But it's not a bad film, it's more a misguided one. Maybe they shouldn't have opted for retelling the story of Eric and Shelley, and instead drawn from the pantheon of other Crow tales that have been told over the last few decades of comic releases. By restricting it to what has already been told on screen, it primarily limits itself in wanting to remain faithful to what was already seen, whilst it also undoes many people's ideas of who those characters are. That said, I did enjoy this somewhat, and I've never found myself bored or unengaged with what was happening on screen. Is it a film that I'll watch again? Maybe not, but it did pass time, didn't feel like I'd wasted any hours on something bad. The Crow isn't terrible, but it isn't strong enough to be considered a success. Seemingly lacking confidence in the story that it's trying to tell, while Skarsgård and Twigs try their hardest to make you care, in the end, you walk away just sated but not satisfied.